Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to completely cut through all that dystopian sci-fi noise and look at the actual reality of artificial intelligence. You know, if you just casually scroll through the headlines, you'd probably think we're right on the brink of an inevitable robot takeover. But if you look at the actual science, you'll find a much more hopeful story. Today, we're diving into some incredible insights from a recent BBC World Service panel at Imperial College London, and we're exploring how three brilliant pioneers are using AI to solve some of our most pressing, fundamentally human problems. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. We'll be breaking AI down into three distinct pillars: the healer, the thinker, and the companion. After that, we'll tackle the whole regulation conundrum before wrapping up with a look at what a symbiotic future actually means for all of us. Let's get into it.
First up, Part 1, The Healer, featuring Regina Barzilay.
So, Regina is an MIT professor, and her journey into medical AI actually started with something incredibly personal: her own breast cancer diagnosis. She was being treated at a top Boston hospital, literally just a subway stop from MIT, and she was completely shocked by the lack of advanced tech being used. Looking back at her mammograms from 2 years prior, she realized that a tiny cancer was already there, but it was completely lost in the visual noise to a human radiologist. And that's exactly where AI steps in. It doesn't get overwhelmed by all that visual complexity. It simply removes the guesswork, catching anomalies years earlier than we can. But Regina didn't just stop at oncology. She aimed this massive predictive power right at drug-resistant bacteria. Her team essentially fed a machine thousands of molecules, teaching it which ones killed bacteria and which ones didn't. And the result? The AI predicted entirely new structures, ultimately discovering our very first new antibiotic in 3 decades. It found a molecule so incredibly alien that no human would have ever naturally designed it. Now, this breakthrough reveals a seriously maddening medical paradox. You'd think hospitals would be rushing to adopt this stuff, right? But in the US, medical billing is directly tied to the actual time a doctor spends with a patient. Because of this setup, an American doctor who uses AI to make a faster, more accurate diagnosis actually loses money. The system literally penalizes them for being efficient. Crazy, right? So, the crucial takeaway here is that the real roadblocks to medical AI, they just aren't technical anymore. The technology is absolutely mature enough to save lives today. The real barriers are these constantly changing international regulations, a total lack of modernized billing infrastructure, and an incredibly slow translation from the lab to actual patient care. The bottlenecks are human-made systems, not the algorithms.
Moving right along to Part 2, The Thinker, featuring David Silver.
David is a principal research scientist over at Google DeepMind, and he actually started out in the video game industry. He got super frustrated by the rigid, pre-written scripts controlling non-player characters, so he turned to reinforcement learning to build true intelligence. Instead of just hard-coding a bunch of rules, reinforcement learning lets a system navigate really complex environments through its own trial and error. It's actually a lot like how biological organisms adapt to feedback from their environment, like a kid learning not to touch a hot stove. But, you know, that begs a really fascinating question. How exactly do you reward a machine? I mean, it doesn't have biological drives. It doesn't get a little dopamine hit from eating a freshly baked cookie. So how on earth do you teach it what is good and what is bad? Well, to a machine, the ultimate reward is actually remarkably simple. It's literally just a mathematical signal. You give it a positive 1 if it does something good, and a negative 1 if it does something bad. That is it, the whole shebang. Everything an AI learns in this framework, every wildly complex strategy it develops, stems entirely from trying to maximize that one single number. And it turns out that simple number holds an enormous amount of power. In fact, this simple mathematical reward led to David's absolute crowning achievement, AlphaGo. Now, chess, which AI mastered decades ago, is purely tactical look ahead. But the game of Go, it's like unpeeling an onion. The board is so vast that players have to rely on deep intuition to imagine how a game will pan out literally hundreds of moves later. Before AlphaGo, we genuinely believed that kind of creative intuition was exclusively a human trait. And really, this brings us to the ultimate goal of David's work: artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Right now, we just have narrow AI, systems that only play Go or only screen for cancer. AGI is the major shift toward a system that can learn anything. Think of humanity. One person becomes a master chef, another a brilliant scientist, another a world-class pianist.
AGI aims to possess that exact same beautiful, diverse flexibility, capable of approaching and mastering any number of unique problems.
All right, let's transition to our third pillar, part 3, The Companion, featuring Paolo Pirjanian. Paolo's work is deeply, deeply personal. Growing up as a refugee, he intimately knew the feeling of being alienated, and that directly inspired him to create emotionally intelligent robots, a technology that is finding a truly urgent use case right now. Over the last 10 years, autism prevalence in the US has spiked from 1 in 200 children to 1 in 30. That is a staggering jump, and it's created a massive labor shortage in therapy. Paolo realized his human-centered robots could step right into this gap. Now, crucially, these aren't meant to replace human contact. Though, let's be real, some days a robot might seem like a better conversationalist. Think of them more like training wheels. In a super safe, non-judgmental environment, autistic children can practice absolutely crucial social skills, things like eye contact and turn-taking. They can practice all of this before taking those training wheels off and applying those skills out in the real world. And Paolo sees this going way beyond childhood development. He looks at the vulnerability of human aging, the social isolation, the physical decline. He believes that within the next decade, these emotionally intelligent systems will transition into our homes as companions for the elderly. Just imagine a system that not only talks to you to prevent loneliness, but physically assists you with cooking a meal or going for a safe walk, allowing people to maintain their independent living with dignity for much, much longer. Which brings us to part 4, the regulation conundrum, balancing all these risks. So, with all this incredible, transformative power spanning healthcare to emotional care, we inevitably hit a massive point of friction. We really have a clash of two incredibly valid perspectives here. To Regina, the healer, patients are literally dying from incurable diseases today, so delaying AI deployment because of regulatory red tape is actively costing lives. But then Paolo points out a stark geopolitical reality. If one nation slows down via local regulation, international adversaries simply won't, potentially winning an irreversible strategic arms race. Both sides present a highly compelling, urgent case. Finally, let's look at part 5, a symbiotic future. Despite these incredibly tough debates over regulation, all 3 of these pioneers share a surprisingly optimistic view. They see AI not as a human replacement, but as our absolute greatest intellectual partner. And we're already seeing this symbiosis everywhere. Google DeepMind is optimizing tactics for Liverpool Football Club. Musicians are using AI to write songs 100 times faster. And AGI is poised to become the ultimate hyper-personalized teacher. AI isn't removing our skills, it's just automating the busy work. Which leads to just a beautiful analogy. Think of AI as the modern calculator. Before calculators, brilliant minds spent countless, grueling hours just crunching basic numbers. Now imagine what Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein could have achieved if they had access to today's AI tools. If they could just ask a system to generate code or process data in seconds. We are stepping into an era where you won't even need to know how to code to bring a massive idea to life. So I want to leave you with one thrilling question to end this explainer. When you have the ultimate intellectual partner by your side, and you no longer have to sweat the small stuff, what will you create?